So, hello everybody. We will start even if people are still arriving because we have a very tight program. My name is Caroline Olivier. I'm the head of news at Arte, European Public Service Media. And we at Arte, we are focusing on European and international topics. And I guess as many other media, we realized these last months and years that this is becoming more and more difficult, being as a journalist on an international ground. More and more wars, of course, you see it every day in the newspaper, more and more high-tension areas, dictatorships, regimes, many places where journalists cannot go anymore. And so we at Arte, but I guess many other media too, discovered or rediscovered a very ancient way of doing journalism by drawing. So everywhere where cameras and journalists cannot have access, everywhere where you have to protect your sources or everywhere where you have very sensitive issues to cover, the pencil can be a very precious way of doing journalism. And this is what we want to look at today, and I will do this with very precious, high-ranking and fabulous panelists. Ferhat Alani is a journalist and author. He is a Franco-Iraqian, French-Iraqian journalist. Ferhat has worked for many years on various very difficult grounds in the Middle and Far East, of course, Asian countries, African countries, in the United States too. It's becoming more and more difficult. He did documentaries and reportage, he wrote articles and books, but today we will mainly focus on his graphic documentary work. So welcome, Ferhat.
Thank you.
And Olivier Kugler, he is illustrator and graphic reporter, German but living in the UK, so very European and international today. He is illustrator and author of several drawn reportages, also from difficult environments. He very much focused on refugee camps in Syria and Greece, also in France and Germany. He works from interviews. He's drawing on the basis of his own interviews. And we will see that the two of them are very different and complementary, I would say. So one very basic motivation to draw are the areas where you don't have access. And you will see a lot of examples during this panel, but we will start out with the one which is probably the best known current example of an area where journalists don't have any access. It's Gaza. And so Ferhat, you are the author of a web series, L'œil de Ferhat, the Through Ferhat's Eyes in English, which is published on Arte, and in which you revisit some of your most significant places of reportage. And this episode is about Gaza. It was published in 2025, and we will take a look.
14 à Gaza. Sur le toit de cette maison, avec Tarek Sheheber, un Gazaoui, je scrute le ciel. Un bourdonnement lointain et incessant nous assaille. Un drone vole au-dessus de nous. Nous sommes quelques jours après le cessez-le-feu d'une guerre entre Israël et le Hamas. À Gaza, on les appelle Zannanat, bourdons. Tarek brandit un sac en plastique. À l'intérieur se trouvent des petits morceaux de missiles. Il les dépose autour du trou causé par celui-ci et me raconte. C'était un soir d'août 2014. Ses neveux et nièces jouaient sur la terrasse. En montant sur le toit, il découvre l'horreur. Les 3 enfants gisent au sol. Il ne respire plus. Lui perd connaissance. Face à notre caméra, il brandit leurs photos et hurle. Ces enfants étaient-ils des membres du Hamas? Nous poursuivons en filmant le quartier de Beit Hanoun, complètement dévasté. 90% des immeubles ont été réduits en poussière. Je suis accompagné par Rami Abou Jamous, journaliste palestinien de Gaza, parfaitement francophone, incontournable pour les reporters français qui veulent se rendre à Gaza. C'est grâce à lui que j'ai obtenu l'accord du Hamas pour filmer. Auparavant, j'ai obtenu l'accord des autorités israéliennes. En 2014, il était difficile, mais encore possible, de faire son travail de journaliste. 10 ans plus tard, tout a changé. Après les attaques du 7 octobre 2023 perpétrées par le Hamas, le journalisme est devenu une mission suicidaire. Les reporters sont des cibles, les caméras des menaces. Gaza a sombré dans un trou noir de l'information. Mais Rami Abou Jamous est toujours là. Lui et les autres journalistes palestiniens, armés de leur courage, continuent à raconter l'indicible. Avec leur téléphone, leur carnet et souvent au prix de leur vie, ils maintiennent une vérité que certains préféreraient voir disparaître. Et nous alors, nous autres journalistes, hors de Gaza, avons-nous fait ce qu'il fallait? Nous aurions dû être là, en première ligne, malgré les risques, malgré les entraves. C'était notre rôle, notre devoir. Le silence du reste du monde, le manque de présence internationale ont rendu chaque mot écrit, chaque image filmée par un journaliste palestinien encore plus précieux. Mais il révèle aussi une honte partagée. Nous n'étions pas là. Nous avons essayé. Nous avons écrit une lettre à l'armée israélienne, les priant de nous laisser entrer, de nous permettre de voir de nos propres yeux, de raconter ce que nous devions raconter. Ils ont refusé, arguant qu'ils voulaient nous protéger, comme si notre métier pouvait se limiter à regarder de loin. Rami, lui, est resté. Tous les matins, depuis le 7 octobre 2023, il nous écrit à nous autres, les quelques 200 reporters connectés à lui. Salut les amis, toujours vivant. Rami ne cherche pas le sensationnel. Il ne court pas après des images de mort ou de désespoir pour satisfaire une audience lointaine. Ce qu'il veut, c'est documenter, pour que Gaza ne soit pas oublié, pour que ses enfants, comme son fils, qui ne comprennent pas encore ce qui leur arrive, puissent un jour retrouver ces morceaux d'histoire et se dire « Nous étions là, nous avons existé ». Selon le Comité pour la protection des journalistes, 167 reporters palestiniens ont été tués entre le 7 octobre 2023 et le 15 janvier 2025, date du cessez-le-feu entre Israël et le Hamas. La Palestine est devenue de loin l'endroit le plus meurtrier au monde pour les journalistes.
Yes. Farhad, this is a work about Gaza, of course, but also about journalism. Why was it particularly important for you to pick this topic?
Hello to everyone. Your question is really right, because this is a question I ask myself every time I go on a specific field, especially a field like Gaza, is how do we transmit the information when we don't have any access? Gaza, in my view, is the first place in the world where the access is completely denied. It's impossible to go there. So does it mean that we have to stop telling the narrative, telling the stories? I think not. And I think this is our responsibility as a journalist to find other ways to tell stories. When you can have verified sources, when you can work with professional journalists on the ground, which is my case. We showed Rami Abou Jamous, who is still there, and I worked with him from a long distance to tell the precise story based on what he is saying on the ground.
Is there something you would say you showed us in this drawing that you would not have been able to show otherwise?
Yes, there's many things. The thing is, I have, as a journalist, and I think as many reporters, is the obsession for memory. When you cannot cover a situation, you are part of the collective amnesia. And if you don't cover Gaza, even though we received a lot of images through the social networks, we have to acknowledge that sometimes we are there's too much information, too much images around. So the fact that you can draw and take your time to tell a story is a way to get more into the human side of a very complex situation, and to give as well time to have space and to have in-depth reflection about the situation.
Thank you. We're talking about sensitive and complex human situation. We will switch to an example of Olivier. Which I will show here. Thank you. It's a portrait of Vian, who is a Syrian refugee woman that you met in a refugee camp. And it's interesting because, as you see, it's a one-pager, but there are many things going on in this one-pager. It's like an animated film in a one-pager, kind of, with a lot of text. But could you resume perhaps the situation and why you chose this woman to do a portrait, a journalistic portrait of her?
Yeah, I'm a reportage illustrator. I like to draw people I meet and places I visit. And in 2013, I was commissioned by Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières, to go to Domis, a refugee camp in Iraqi Kurdistan. And they asked me to create drawings documenting the circumstances of Syrian refugees who found shelter in this camp. And I spent time with MSF's mental health team. And Vian is a patient of Susan. She's one of the psychotherapists. And she was one of the few people, the few women actually in the camp who allowed me to interview them. And you can see Vian sitting here it's in a container in the refugee camp where Susan has her surgery. And Vian told me about her husband, who is or used to be an activist for Kurdish rights, and he was already arrested several times by the Syrian Secret Service before the civil war started. And he had been in prison several times. And she told me when I met her that she hasn't seen her husband for 60 months because he's been arrested by the secret police. And at the beginning, she thought he will be released after maybe a month or 2 months. But after a while, she told me, I know he will never ever come back. He's one of the people who were kind of vanished in the torture chambers in the prisons.
So it's a very vulnerable situation, right?
Yeah.
And how do you proceed drawing her? Is it a realistic picture we see, or do you somehow adapt to the situation?
It is a pretty realistic depiction of her. I took photos of her during the interview. I recorded the conversation we had. And back in my studio in London, I made a drawing based on the photo reference I took.
What can drawings add for you? I mean, the same story, you just did a resume of it. You could also tell it in an article or in a photo story. What is the additional value of a drawing?
It's a good question. I guess that's my language I speak. It's my medium, and I was commissioned by Doctors Without Borders. They are a partner of the Fumetto comic book festival in Lucerne, in Switzerland. And so they asked me to do a drawing, obviously, and I like the idea of comic books, of telling stories with drawings in a sequential manner. And I guess someone could have done this, obviously, also in the medium of photography, but this is just the way I do my work. Mm-hmm. I guess it's a more personal approach than photography. You've got more kind of space to include things and leave things out, okay, and focus on certain things that are important for you.
And you did capital letters before Trump had this idea, right?
Say it again, please.
You did capital letters before Trump had this idea.
Yes.
Why capital letters?
I'm very much inspired by French comic books, and their lettering is usually also done in capital letters, and I guess that's where I've got it from.
Okay. Do you think drawings can help dealing very particular sensitive issues?
Definitely, yes, yeah. But I could not describe. You can do this with photography as well. It's just a different approach, and that's the way I work in. And yeah.
Okay. I would like to show you an extract of a documentary that deals with a particularly sensitive issue. I just tried to open it, I'm sorry. It doesn't work. We will switch to some other before. Yeah, I tried to open this. This one? Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. So, I'm sorry. So, there is, this is a documentary that was done and published in 2022, and it tells the story. It is called Return to Raqqa, and it tells the story, which most of you will remember, of 19 journalists that were kidnapped by ISIS in 2012. James Foley was one of the victims. Others could return alive, and this documentary is based on their testimonies. And you will see that they chose drawings for one of the situations which is most difficult to cover for all journalists. It's torture.
Turca, era la capital del Estado Islámico, nosotros éramos 23 tíos vestidos de naranja, todos extranjeros, y ninguno que yo recuerde hablaba árabe, con lo cual era una cosa inviable. A todo el que había intentado fugarse lo torturaban de forma salvaje. O sea, al Daniel lo torturaron de forma salvaje, al John Cantley y al James Foley los torturaron de forma salvaje, le hacían waterboarding, les pegaban todos los días. O sea, me acuerdo que el Cantley una vez me dijo, nos torturaron hasta que nos mataron en vida. O sea, hasta que consideraron que nos habían roto.
Regularmente los Beatles venían a nuestra celda a darnos una lección magistral de Islam. Nos teníamos que estar de cara a la pared, con las manos puestas sobre el muro. Teníamos que escuchar durante horas el contenido de esa supuesta lección. Cuando acababan, además, nos hacían preguntas y si no respondíamos lo que ellos querían, pues nos daban una paliza. A mí no me palizaron tanto como palizaron a rehenes de otras nacionalidades. Pero en alguna ocasión me dieron también mi tanda de palos correspondiente. Y bueno, cuando sucedía eso, la verdad es que te sentías muy vulnerable. Te sentías como que a partir de ahora los Beatles van a ir a por ti, ¿no? Y te sientes verdaderamente indefenso.
Ferhat, do you think drawings can show sometimes things that you would never show otherwise as a journalist?
I think if you want to be practical, drawings and animated documentaries can have many objectives. The first would be to anonymize faces or identities when it is required. Sometimes to protect some sources, or sometimes because it's too dangerous to show some faces, as we can see here in this documentary. The other objective is also to be a kind of bypass censorship, because in many places, as we mentioned, whether it's Gaza or maybe Afghanistan, it's very difficult to go over the censorship. Sometimes it's impossible. So drawings is a way to still make the story visible when, because of the censorship, it's invisible.
Okay, you gave me the key word for an episode where you had to face this problem, and we're speaking about Afghanistan. I will find it, don't worry. Perhaps you can already begin to speak about the story of l'œil de Ferhat à Afghanistan. You can go ahead. I have to find it first. Oh, it's not here. You can... Peut-être tu veux déjà commencer à en parler.
Yeah, so the story you want to show is about Afghanistan. I'm not a specialist of Afghanistan. I've been there just twice to cover stories before the Taliban came into power. But I was in contact with women that I met before the Taliban took over in August 21. It was very difficult at this time, but it was possible to talk to women and to film women in the street. This time is very complicated, so I decided to tell their stories without showing their faces, with hiding their identities, even though I was in touch with them through WhatsApp.
Okay, let's go.
Reprennent le pouvoir en Afghanistan. Les images d'Afghans, presque exclusivement des hommes, courant derrière un avion américain, font le tour du monde. Ces scènes traduisent la panique face au régime taliban, mais révèlent aussi une absence frappante, celle des femmes, tenues à l'écart, invisibles dans l'espace public, alors qu'elles sont les premières menacées. Je me suis demandé ce qu'était devenue celle que j'avais rencontrée à Kaboul. C'était en 2014. 13 ans après la chute des talibans, je voulais voir ce que l'intervention américaine avait réellement changé. Sur le papier, tout semblait évoluer. Gouvernement élu, armée formée, femmes de retour à l'université, ONG, chantier. Mais dès l'aéroport, la réalité m'a frappé. Kaboul était une ville verrouillée, tendue. Murs de béton, checkpoint, regard fatigué. La peur n'avait pas disparu. Elle avait juste changé de forme. J'ai découvert un pays figé entre deux mondes. Femmes en burqa et députés. Enfants vendant des chewing-gums et anciens moudjahidines devenus hommes d'affaires. Puis j'ai rencontré Niloufar Rahmani, 22 ans, première femme pilote de l'armée afghane. Droite, concentrée, c'est elle qui donnait les ordres. Si son assurance dérangeait, elle a fini par imposer le respect. Mais déjà, elle recevait des menaces de la part des talibans. Dans les airs, Niloufar partage son rêve de ciel et d'étoiles, et celui d'un avenir où les femmes pourraient voler, comme elle. Elle a tenu à nous présenter des animatrices radio, des enseignantes, une députée. Toutes prenaient la parole, portées par une fragile parenthèse de liberté. Leur quotidien était précaire, parfois menacé, mais leur voix existait dans un pays où la situation était loin d'être parfaite. Puis j'ai appris que Niloufar avait fui aux États-Unis, après une menace de trop, juste avant le départ des Américains. Lorsqu'ils ont repris le pouvoir, les talibans ont promis de respecter les droits des femmes. Mais ils ont aussitôt effacé ces dernières de la vie publique. Plus d'école, plus de travail, plus de liberté. Aujourd'hui, elles vivent cachées, changent d'identité, suppriment leur passé. La peur est là, et cette impression d'avoir été trahies par leur propre pays et par le monde. Et pourtant, elles résistent. École clandestine, écriture sous pseudonyme, cercle d'entraide, chant. Ce qu'elles subissent n'est pas seulement une oppression, c'est un apartheid de genre. Réduites au silence, elles sont punies pour avoir existé. Récemment, une mauvaise nouvelle est tombée depuis les États-Unis. Donald Trump a annoncé de nouvelles restrictions sur l'entrée des ressortissants de plusieurs pays, dont l'Afghanistan. Si cette interdiction d'entrée avait existé à l'époque, Niloufar n'aurait jamais pu fuir. Au téléphone, elle m'a confié. Leurs ailes sont brisées, mais leur voix, elle, cherche encore le ciel.
Ferhat, how do you assure the journalistic part of it, verification of sources, etc.? Do you work like for a report or documentary?
First of all, I'm sorry for the people who don't speak French. The story was about a woman that I met in 2014. She was the first female pilot of the Afghani army. And I'm talking then about the women after the Taliban took power, who are not even allowed to go to school. So there's a comparison between them. And to answer to your question, I worked with the journalists in Afghanistan that I met when I was able to go there on the field. So I know they are professional and they are verified sources. and they give me all the information they could give me. The only identity that I was allowed to show is this woman called Nilofar, that again that I met in Kabul in 2014, and I had the news that she left Afghanistan just before the Taliban took power, so she's safe in the US, and she allowed me to reveal her identity. But the thing I wanted to show in this episode is how you can always tell a story when you respect the rules of ethics, when you can have access to verified sources, and when you can propose a space where you can at the same time get the information and understand, maybe, hopefully in a deeper way, the situation. And Afghanistan is a perfect example of this complexity, I guess.
Thank you. Olivier, you had a very special situation where you had to interview a mafioso, and there was a kind of different challenge to protect your source. And you did it by drawing, of course. So let's see the picture here. Could you tell us a little bit more about the mafioso and the situation you were in?
Yes, I was commissioned by a Swiss magazine called Reportage, and the editor asked me to join Sandro Mattioli. He's an Italian-German journalist, and he was writing a story about Luigi Bonaventura. And he used to be a boss in the 'Ndrangheta, the mafia. And he went into witness protection program, and I was asked to join the journalist visiting the mafioso and his family, his wife and 2 children, in an apartment somewhere in Italy where he was protected by a special unit from the police. And so I spent 3 or 4 days with the journalist in the apartment of the mafioso. And while Sandro was interviewing him, I was doing drawings in the apartment. I was doing a portrait of Luigi. I made drawings of the family, of all of us eating dinner and lunch together.
And was he happy with his?
He was happy with it, and I don't think I ever met a mafioso before, so it was kind of quite an interesting, bizarre experience for me. Something I would have never thought I would ever do in my whole life. It was a bit like in the movies. And he did not look like you would imagine a mafioso to look like. Okay. He looked like he could have been a teacher at my high school or so.
And you were allowed to show his family or not?
He told me he's very happy I can draw his likeness, his portrait, but he didn't want me to draw his children, the faces of his children. So I was,
how do you did?
I think, I don't know, there might be one drawing there where you can see the family on the kind of, when we were having dinner. Okay. So I was just drawing their hands and the kind of the cartoon characters on their t-shirts and while they were eating.
Tell us a little bit of how you are working, Ferhat. You are not drawing yourself, you're drawing with different colleagues. Is this an advantage or a disadvantage not to draw yourself?
So yes, exactly. I'm not able to draw or to animate. So I'm working with the illustrators, and I find it at the same time challenging and rewarding. Why? Because when I'm talking about a topic that I know a bit, like Gaza, Afghanistan, or Iraq, I know that I'm a bit subjective because I'm really into it. When I work with someone, his name is Ulysse, the one who is animating the series on Arte, I'm making sure he doesn't know anything about the country. Because to me, it creates a kind of balance in the approach. It's very interesting for me to debate with him, to discuss details, especially with someone who has not any clue about the topic. So I mean, I'm leaving space for him to work on his imagination as long as we discuss the details and to be sure that the facts are really precise and professional.
So it happens regularly that you correct him?
Many times.
Okay.
And he's asking me very interesting questions sometimes about the culture, about the reality of dialogue, for example, between two people in Gaza or in Afghanistan. Sometimes I'm correcting him, and sometimes he brings me another view on some situation that I was not allowed to see because I was too immersed in it. Something based on the daily life, and to me it helps to reach a wider audience, especially like young people or non-specialist readers or viewers. Yeah.
Why do you think younger people are more easily reached by this kind of journalism?
I think the images and the animation brings something more human to a story that seems to be distant. If I take Afghanistan, for example, it's very far from France. It's not concerning, as we say in France, like it has no impact on the daily life of French people. But when you bring images, sounds, it brings emotion at the same time. So the young readers or the non-specialists or the people who are not really interested could connect with the story through emotions and through informations that links the life of French people, for example, and Afghani people.
Olivier, you work very differently. You draw yourself, and I think you take photos on the ground and then bring them home. I have another example here of a Syrian refugee, which we will show. Perhaps you can tell us how you proceed. How do you work very practically?
Yeah, in this series of drawings, I portrayed a young Syrian man. I met him one evening when he was about to set up a sound system that he's renting out to people who have parties, weddings, birthdays. And I just saw him in the evening and I introduced myself to him. I told him what I'm doing. I asked if I can take photos of him and also can have a chat with him. And he told me he doesn't have time this evening, so I met him the next day and I interviewed him, and he told me that he was just doing his military service when the Syrian civil war started. Mm-hmm. And he basically was trained by the Syrian army as a sniper. And he told me about his experiences, how he saw friends of his getting killed in an ambush.
And then you took his photo. You take advantage of the situation to have some distance between the interview itself and then taking the photo home and drawing. Is it important for you to have this lapse of time?
It is I started to do this kind of work, and I learned to draw on location. Mm-hmm. So when I do this kind of work, it's important for me that I've got the connection with the people, that I've met them. And then I guess I could draw them in these situations, but I don't have the time to do it usually. And it's also the likenesses won't be as good. And I like the idea of having the distance and then taking, I don't know, a week or half a week to work on one drawing and get it. And I like to add the details and the coloring and to tell the story in a sequential manner.
Both of you are right now working on new projects, which are very interesting, and so I would like, before giving you the floor, like to have a word on the project you are right now working on, because it's another way of using drawing. Ferhat, you did a documentary about Viktor Orban and how the system Orban is given an example to many right-wing streams in Europe, and it's a documentary which is more or less analytic. You can see it on Arte, and you chose to transform it into a drawing. So please tell us. I will show you some first. I think it's off the record. It's not published yet. So tell us first.
So yes, so the documentary you mentioned is about Viktor Orban in Hungary and his method called illiberalism, which is against institutions, for example, like the media, like justice or education. In this documentary, we show how he took over in Hungary and how he stayed for 16 years. And how he expanded his method to Europe, Italy, for example, with Giorgia Meloni, or Austria with Herbert Kickl. But sometimes when you go on the field, you cannot tell everything. You cannot, because we have a limited duration. It's a 52 minutes documentary. So I wanted to collect all the information that I could not bring into this documentary and make a graphic novel for this purpose. And the other purpose is to reach a wider audience, because I'm sure that the young persons or the non-specialists or people who are not interested into politics would not necessarily watch this documentary. But with the graphic novel, you can use, for example, the sense of humor. You can, by the images, again, touch people with emotions. And to me, as a journalist, I think we have to get a wider audience, especially during these times where journalism is under threats. And I think it's very important to be able to express what we saw to a kid of 7 years old or to a senior of 77 years old. The idea is to bring another form of narrative.
Thank you. Olivier, you are working on the protest movement all over the world, we can say, right?
Yes. Since the Hamas attacks on Gaza, I have become more and more interested in protest and activism as a reaction to Israel's war on Gaza. And I've been attending lots of protests since then. I've been talking with activists. And about 2 months ago, I was approached by an editor at the New York Times, and she asked me what I'm working on at the moment. And I explained to her about my interest in activism and the protest related to the war in Gaza. And she told me that she would like me to do a larger series portraying people going to protest, and we can't do 10 or 12 drawings over here just about related to Gaza. So she asked me to do one drawing about a Holocaust survivor and an activist I met in London at the protest. And this drawing was published. You can see it here. His name is Stephen Kaposh, and I joined him on a protest 3 weeks ago, where he was leading with other people a protest march against the war in Iran. And he's 88 years old. He is a Holocaust survivor. He was 7 years old when Nazi troops invaded his native Budapest, and he told me about his experience during the war. And also he's got this special message as a Holocaust survivor, and he finds it appalling that the Israeli state is using the memory, the legacy of the Holocaust as an excuse or a justification for its actions in Gaza, in the West Bank, and also the wider region. So, so this drawing has just been published on Sunday, last Sunday, and yeah, for the rest of the year, I'm going to do one drawing each month related to protest.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much.
Great.
So the floor is to you, dear audience. Are there any questions, remarks, ideas?
Hi, so in the rise of misinformation with AI art and animations on war, do you believe that human-made art and animation could be the key to dissolving it? and bringing a more human connection to these issues?
Yeah, I think the hand-drawn, handcrafted illustration is something, I think it's something very special and something very human. And I kind of like the idea, I would like to have, and I've been thinking about this, would be nice to have an AI program that does the work for me and gives me more time to work on storytelling. And, but I think it's something really, really precious when you can draw a person, you sit opposite of the person, you've got this human interaction. And yeah, it's something very precious and special, and I'm a little bit afraid of AI kind of getting into this kind of business. But then on the other side, I think, and I hope that the human factor in the end will be appreciated and kind of win, and will still be around. Yeah.
I'm not an animator or a drawing person, but I would never work with AI if my aim is to bring emotions. We were talking about the discussion I have with my colleague who is an animator when we discuss topics like Gaza or Afghanistan. AI will never replace the human view and the experience that you can bring when you go on the field. When I'm talking about the animation, it doesn't mean that I will never go back to the field. It's the opposite. I'm doing both. And when I come back from a field like Gaza or Afghanistan, in my view, and I hope that I can bring something more human and related to senses, like the smell, the sounds, the experience that the AI cannot bring, hopefully.
I don't know where the mic is. Here are questions, and in the back too.
Hi, my name is Patrick Gadara. I'm an editorial cartoonist from Nairobi. So what you're doing there is very, for me, it's familiar, it's very interesting as a cartoonist, as something that has been in newspapers for a long time. And I'm wondering whether you see your work as a continuation of the work of cartoonists and illustrators in helping tell the news.
I could not understand you. The sound is very... Would you maybe come closer, please? Okay.
If I understood correctly, the question is there a kind of continuation of a work that started really a long time ago already?
It's whether they see their work as a continuation of it. Yeah.
Der Zeichner, die es schon immer gab für Zeichnungen.
A little bit, yeah. I remember when I was a child, I saw, it was a TV series about a war artist during the American Civil War who was doing, he was a newspaper journalist, but he went to the battlefields and he was doing drawings of what was happening of the battlefield, and I really, really enjoyed watching that, and I was maybe 12 or something like that, so I do like the idea of kind of following this tradition. And I think it's an interesting addition to more, obviously, contemporary or modern kind of journalism or photojournalism or video. Yeah.
Ferhat, did we always have this kind of doing journalism? Is it like a slow food journalism kind of that we come back to?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's very recent. It's very new. I didn't really dig into animation and drawings before, even though I've been a reader of graphic novels for a long time. I don't think I'm following a specific tradition of cartoonist, but it's a way, again, to continue your work and your struggle when you cannot go on the field. This is how I view the animation and the drawings.
Yes.
Hey, I'm Bjarke. I guess the blunt question is, how difficult is it to do this for a living, financially speaking? I mean, AI is one question, it's not my core question, but already in industry that is in crisis, investigative journalism is not being funded in the same way as before, you guys draw. How difficult is it to actually find people who can buy your work and for a price that you can live off?
It is very difficult. Yeah. I'm lucky, I did a master's in illustration at the School of Visual Arts in New York. I finished in 2002, and I got a lot of work from the Guardian newspaper in the UK. And I could almost make a living with just working for the Guardian. In 2008, when the financial crisis hit, the first thing the Guardian cut was illustration budget. And I was one of the people who was kind of made. Illustration is a luxury for a newspaper or for a magazine. And I guess at this time also they had to make the newspaper smaller, thinner. There was not as much space available anymore. And it has become more and more difficult since then. And my working process, it's quite labor and intensive. You talked about slow journalism. I thought what I'm doing is very slow journalism, and you're not getting paid for that. What is a pity. Yeah. So I do other work, kind of more commercial illustrations, what I enjoy doing too. But this is the stuff I really want to do, and it would be great if this kind of work would be more appreciated when it comes to paying for it.
Same kind of answer. I'm an independent journalist. If I want to survive financially, I cannot go only with animation, and I'm not drawing myself. So I write books, I go on the field to make documentaries, and I'm privileged. I know I'm lucky because I'm supported by Arte. Arte, who is funding this series called Dans l'œil de Farhat, which helped us a lot to go deeper and deeper into the quality of the animation we do. But it's a very good question because it's very expensive to make animation. AI is not enough. You need a whole team. There is a long process of course, drawing, of animation, and of post-production. So without Arte, I would not be able to do this.
Is there a... Yes, there.
Last one. Just a question about how you can picture your average audience, who they are nowadays, for whom you're drawing.
If I understood well your question, is who the audience is. So at the beginning with this animated series on Arte, I thought I would reach what we call the average audience for Arte, which means like from 30 to 70 years old. But I had many feedback from teachers, for example, who took those series, those samples, to show them to students at school. So it was a really good surprise to acknowledge that this animation has another purpose, is to sometimes educate some students and to have a complementary lesson on history. It was really the case with Iraq and Afghanistan, for example, even with Gaza. So to answer to your questions, now the audience is really wide. It goes from the student to the senior. It's a complete average like this.
Just a little word as the representative of the media who's publishing. What is very interesting about this series is that we publish it on Instagram, on the platform, and I'm looking at Erad, who is the boss of Arte Reportage. I think you also did it on broadcast. So this is really the interesting thing of this way of doing journalism. We as a media use it on all platforms, and it works with all publics. So it's universal.
The question was about who my
Your
audience.
public, yeah.
I guess it's mainly readers of magazines and newspapers in the US mainly, and also in Italy. A lot of the work I'm doing, the reportage illustrations are getting also published in the Internazionale magazine here. And yeah, so I guess most of my work has been seeing in the US and in Italy. Yeah.
Do we have finished? Okay. Thank you to the audience, and thank you the panelists.
Very much.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thanks for having us.